Alright, so in this video we're going to take a look at aggregation. And in order to discuss aggregation in Java, I want to make sure that we also understand the idea of aggregation in the real world. Essentially what I'm talking about here is being able to form an aggregate, or effectively a collection of different parts. The idea of this in Java, or just in general object-oriented programming, when it comes to aggregation, is that essentially you want one class where when you create objects of that class, they're essentially going to be like a central hub for several other objects to be placed inside of. So the idea here is that you're going to have something like, say, one class right here. So we create an object of this class. So maybe this is going to be an object of, let's say, the car class. Okay. And so then, one of the things you would expect to put into this would be tires. So if we imagine that the tires are going to be 4 other separate tire objects, so maybe we create at least one of these right here. So you imagine that you have each one of these tire objects that will then be inside of this car object. Okay, so we'll make at least a couple of these. So you have this general idea of essentially placing objects into another object. In order to accomplish this, the way that we're going to approach it, essentially within this car class, when we define the class itself, we would set up these tires to be fields of that class. So in code, whenever we see aggregation, you're going to be seeing an object of a class as one of the fields of that class, of another class. Okay, so the example that I'm going to take a look at right here, if we come over to our code, I want to create a program where we're going to have 2 classes. So we're going to do the simplest case for aggregation, where I have just one class inside of another class. And the 2 classes I want to do here, we're going to do a company and a president. And then in addition to those 2, we're going to have a 3rd class, which is going to hold the main method so we can actually run the program. Okay. So the overall project, if you want to go ahead and create that, you can call it company. So I'll go ahead and at least create that first program of company.java. So whenever you create a project for this in an IDE, make sure that you have the company president and this sort of demo file all in the same package. So we'll at least get the header, public class company. We have our body for this. We will end up having a constructor, some getters and setters. In addition to all of this, since I do know that I'm going to need to make a president as well, we're going to create that file too, our president.java. So our public class president. And so for this president, what I want to go ahead and do at the very least is create the a field of data for my president. I'll have a constructor, some getters and setters. The other thing that I want to go ahead and include for both of these files is also going to be a toString method. So for the president, the one field that I want is to just give him a name. So we're going to say string name is equal to, say, initially this empty string. Okay, make sure that it's private as well. Then we'll go ahead and make our constructor. So our public president. For this one, we're just going to focus on at least one constructor for the president and the company. So let's go ahead and make a parameterized constructor. So for the president, we want to go ahead and pass in a name. So we can go ahead and assign that to the name field. To make sure that we can differentiate between these two, we're going to make sure that we use the this keyword. So this.name is equal to name, indicating that this will refer to the field and name by itself will refer to the parameter. We'll then go ahead and also create a setter and a getter for the name. So we're going to have our public void set name with string name. And the functionality of this will be pretty much identical to the constructor. So say this.name is equal to name. We'll then also go ahead and make our getter. So I'll say public string get name. So I have no parameters, and we just want to return this.name. And then the last thing we want to go ahead and do is make the toString method. So I'll say public string toString. We'll return, let's just say the name of the president is plus our name field plus a period. Okay. All right, so this will cover all the code that we want for our president. Now coming back over to the company, what I want to go ahead and do, the one field that I want for the company, or two fields, one of those is going to be this president, and then the other will be the name for the company itself. Okay, so the first one we'll go ahead and knock out is that name. That's just going to be another string. Again, we'll just call it name, keeping in mind that this name field is referring to the name of the company, while this name field is referring to the name of the president. And then the next thing we'll have is the president. So we're going to say private president. We'll call it pres is equal to, in this case, to initialize it, let's just go ahead and say that it's initially just null. So initially it's going to be pointing to what we could effectively describe as nothing. Okay. We'll then go ahead and create our constructor. So we're going to say public company. The company constructor will need to take two things. So we're going to take the name as a string and our president. We'll then go ahead and set each of these to the appropriate field. So we can say this.name is equal to name. And for the president, this is the part where things will be a bit more unique, in the sense that we can't really do a basic assignment like this, because if we do, we're going to say something like this.pres equals pres, but there's a bit of an issue that we're going to run into with this. So I'm going to leave the code like this for right now, and then I'm going to come back to this and address what the issue is by demonstrating it and then fixing it. So right now we're just going to do a basic assignment like this. We're just going to say that this pres that we're passing in, we're going to assign that to the president field. Okay. Then right here, we will go ahead and create the getters and setters. So we'll do the setters first. We'll do public void set name. This will be string name. Say this dot name equals name, and then public void set president, which takes a new president object, and we'll say this dot pres equals pres. We'll then go ahead and have our two getters. So we'll say public string get name. Oops. So I'll have no parameters, and we'll say return this dot name. Our public for this getter for the president, we'll make sure that the return type is president. Get president, and we'll say return this dot president, or this dot pres. And just like I mentioned before, where we have a bit of an issue with doing this basic assignment for our constructor, also for the setter, if we return this dot pres like this in the getter, this is also going to introduce a little bit of an issue that I will also come back and address after I've demonstrated it. So I'll see what's going on there and then also fix it. And then the last thing I need is going to be my getter, or my toString method. So say public string toString. And for this one, what I want to go ahead and do is be able to, whenever I put a company object into a print statement, I want it to print out both the contents of my president as well as give me the name of the company. So to do that, we're going to say return, and we'll say the name of the company is plus this dot name plus our period. And then right here, what I'm going to go ahead and do is just put in this .pres as part of this string. Okay, and the reason that this will work is because of the fact that we made a toString method, or we customized it for the president. And so because of the fact that we made this toString method for the president, if I place that, just the object itself, into this string right here, it's going to end up accessing this toString method, and it will just print this statement right there. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and create a third file for this. And in this file, what we're going to include is the demo code with the main method. So I'm going to call this company demo.java. Say public class company demo. And then we'll go ahead and set up the main method. So we'll have our public static void main, our string array of arguments. And inside of here, what I'm going to go ahead and do is create two things. The first thing I'm going to do is make a president object, and then I'm going to be able to use that president object to make my company object. So we're going to have our president. We'll call this, within the main method for this, we'll just go ahead and call it pres as well. So we equal to a new president object. And right here, we'll go ahead and put in the name of a president. So I suppose in this particular case, what we can use, kind of an old example. This would not necessarily be true anymore, but we'll use Bill Gates as the example. And for the company, we'll say comp is equal to a new company. I'll do the name as Microsoft. And then for the president, we'll just pass in pres. Okay. So once we've done all this, the next thing I want to go ahead and do is just do a simple print statement. And I want to print out my company. Okay. So we'll go ahead and compile this and run it. And the expectation is that we will print out both the name of the company is plus the name Microsoft, and we'll also print out the name of the president is, and then the name Bill Gates. So we'll come over here and we'll compile this. So for this one, I need to go ahead and compile three files: company, president, and company demo. So we're going to have our company.java, president.java, and company demo.java. Okay. We then just need to go ahead and run the company demo, since that program has the main method inside of it. And there we go. So we got the name of the company is Microsoft, and the name of the president is Bill Gates. Okay. So now, let's take a look at why this and this are not necessarily the appropriate way that we want to go about accessing these, or assigning and accessing that president field. So for the first one, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and modify this pres right here. I'm going to say pres.setName. And I'm going to change it to, let's say, John Adams. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the print statement right here, and I want to see what the output for this is going to be. So compile this, run it, and we see we've got a little bit of an issue right here, which is that the name of the president is John Adams. And the reason this is an issue is because of the fact that I set the name for this pres object, but when I pass it in right here, I'm taking that pres and assigning it to this field. And the issue that I've run into is that now this field is effectively connected to or linked to the president object that I made in the main method up here. And the reason for that is because of what I talked about before with trying to copy objects. We run into this issue where what I've done is effectively created a shallow copy, primarily because of this line right here where I just naively assigned one object to another. So the only thing that's being copied here is the reference to the same object, which is to say this particular object right here. So what I need to go ahead and do is fix this in such a way that I can do a deep copy of this instead. So I want to go ahead and make sure that I've created two completely distinct objects and that each one has their own separate reference. So the quickest and easiest way to fix that is if I come over to my president code, I can just go ahead and add a second constructor right here, and we'll just go ahead and make that copy constructor, and then I'll start using that instead of trying to do just a simple assignment. So I'll do public president. This can take in a president object. We'll call it other pres. And then what we want to go ahead and do is take this president object and use it to assign the name. So basically what I'll do is just say this, and we're going to pass in other pres.name. Okay. And so then, once I've got this set up, I'll come over here, and whenever I make my new president object, I'm going to say instead that I want to make a new president, and I'll just pass in this pres object. So we'll just go ahead and copy it. We'll also do that for the setter. This would also run me into the same problem since the code is exactly the same. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that as well. Okay. And then finally, we also have this getter down here. So let's take a look at that and see why this might not be a very good idea either. So if we come over to here, to our company. So let's say we've already made it. We've set the name to this. We'll go ahead and run it and make sure that what we've done so far is working the way we intend for it to. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that correction. So compile it, run it, and now we see that the name stays as Bill Gates. So it remains the way we intend for it to, but if I were to print out the pres object itself, so printing out this pres object, we'll see that at the very least for that object, that name has changed to John Adams. Okay, so now we have got two completely distinct president objects, one that's located, essentially located in the main method, and another one that's located through that field for the company object. Okay, so of course now we want to go ahead and take a look at the other issue, which is this return statement right here. So we're going to return this.pres. So let's say we go ahead and do that, and what I'm going to do is say that I've got another pres, call it pres2 is equal to, and we're going to go ahead and say comp.getPres. Okay, or get president. Okay. We'll then go ahead and do a quick print statement just to take a look at what's inside of pres2. Save that. Compile this. Run it. And we'll see that for this new one that we've got Bill Gates, which makes sense because, you know, the president inside of our company object is Bill Gates. And so when we assign that to pres2 and we print that out, we would expect that to still say pres2. But now let's say that after doing this, I want to go ahead and also just change the name. So I'm going to say pres2.setName. And let's say for this one, since we did John Adams for the other one, we'll go ahead and continue to be a bit clever. So now we've got Thomas Jefferson taking over as our president. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll print out pres2 and see that change. So compile this. We'll run it. And we see we changed it to Thomas Jefferson. But now let's say that in addition to that, I also want to go ahead and reprint my company. Compile it, run it, and now we run into another issue, which is that now the company's president has also changed. And the reason for this is that once again, because of the way that I've done this, with this line and this line, I've once again created a shallow copy where now this pres2 right here and this president field have ended up referencing the same object. So if I modify it using one, then the other is going to reflect the same change. So I need to go ahead and fix this. Technically, there are two ways you could approach this. One is to make sure that when you do this right here, you don't accidentally just do an assignment like this, but you go ahead and construct a new object. But another way that we could approach this that I think would be a bit safer and significantly more secure is to just go ahead and make sure that we kind of take care of it right at the source of the issue, which is returning this.pres by itself. The issue with this is that we're effectively returning a reference to the field itself. Instead, what I'd like to go ahead and do is just return a reference to a copy of the field. That way then that copy of the field and the field itself up here are completely separate from one another. So what we'll go ahead and do right here is instead say new president. We'll pass in this.pres, and we'll go ahead and just make a copy of it using the copy constructor of the president class. Okay. So we'll save that. We'll still got a code like this over here. Go ahead and clear this, compile it, and we'll run it. And now we see, even though we changed the name of pres2 in the main method to Thomas Jefferson, the name of the president in the company object stayed as Bill Gates. Okay. Alright, so this is going to cover everything for aggregation, as well as covering two major issues, basically these two different kinds of security leaks that we could run into with aggregation, essentially making sure that we are creating a copy whenever we assign something to this president field, and also making sure that we create a copy before we send out that field. And of course, the primary reason that we wanted to do all of this, as you could probably tell, is because of the fact that it has this unintended consequence of modifying that field whenever we don't mean to modify that field. And of course, the other big issue with this, particularly because of the fact that we're doing this between two separate files, is because of the fact that this is effectively modifying the data of one of the fields of this class in a way that is not adhering to the methods themselves, meaning that this also breaks that rule of data hiding. So that's another reason why this is so important. Okay. So this is going to cover everything for these two security issues, everything related to creating deep copies and adhering to proper data hiding, and this will cover everything for aggregation. Going into the next video, I want to take a moment to look at generics. So to give you a brief idea for this regarding generics, think of it as essentially an overview of how it is that we can go about creating things like the array list class, our own custom version of something like that in Java.